Washington Journal continues.
Our guest is not only the vice chair of the Armed Services Committee, also a member of the Intelligence Committee. He's Representative Mac Thornberry, Republican of Texas, and joining us now. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can we start with the release of the IG report yesterday? What did you make of the findings?
I guess in a way it's not a surprise, but it shows us that what we've been hearing is not anecdotal evidence. It is more widespread through the system, and it starts to put some numbers on what's happening through the system. So, of course, it's deeply disturbing. It confirms the stories we've been hearing, and hopefully it adds to the momentum to fix the system.
What do you think the fixes involve? What should be fixed?
I don't know. I'm worried that, at some point Secretary Shinseki will be removed or resign and be made a scapegoat when the problems are much deeper in the system. I don't think changing out the top is going to fix things. It's going to take something that's deeper. And the question is, will the administration, along with Congress, be able to make those deeper, maybe even cultural sorts of reforms in this system? And I'm concerned we're going to just kind of do a, rake off the scab, not really get down into the problem.
Legislation in the House will take a look at administrators and make them easier to remove. What do you think about its chances in the Senate?
I'm always hopeful, but the Senate hadn't been doing much of anything lately. But maybe this report from the IG and others will propel them towards greater action. I think certainly greater accountability is one of the things that can change the culture of any government bureaucracy, and so that's a good step. Is that enough? I don't know.
So you don't think Eric Shinseki should resign or be forced out?
I don't think it's a big deal one way or another, to tell you the truth. I think people are looking for scapegoats. There's political heat that's coming on this issue, and so the knee-jerk reaction is, okay, the secretary needs to resign. Now, maybe he hadn't done a good job, but my point is that whether he stays or goes does not fix the system. It's a deeper issue. You've got administrators all over the country, apparently, that had these fake waiting lists. You have facilities all over the country that were not taking care of the veterans in the way that all of us expect them to. So it's something deeper. It's not just a question of mismanagement at the top.
So the president was at West Point yesterday to give a speech on foreign policy. What do you think his speech said about his doctrine when it comes to foreign policy?
I don't know. I thought it was a fairly defensive speech. He's been getting criticism from both sides of the aisle, from across the political spectrum. I thought it was remarkable, actually. The Washington Post editorial board yesterday said that his policies have been consistently bad, not exactly your typical Obama basher. And I think he's feeling the heat for that. He was trying to defend his policies. I think he came across as defensive. But I'm not sure there's some great revelation. The president loves to set up straw man extremes. And in this case, you're either isolationist or you're overly interventionist, and only he is the one right down the middle, with the reasonable answer. And that's exactly the tactic he used yesterday, as he's used time after time. And that's not the way the world works. Setting up straw man on the edges to try to justify your policy that has not had very good results, it may be the tactic that a law professor uses, but it's not real leadership. It's not what we need in the world.
So it's coming off the heels of a policy change when it comes to troops in Afghanistan. What do you think about the number that it will eventually be there?
Two things. One is it distracts me to get to 9,800. They picked that number because it sounds a whole lot better than 10,000. And so I'm afraid we still have this kind of political short-term messaging that drives policy rather than what's in the long-term best interest of the country. The other thing that is deeply disturbing to me is that there is a time limit on it. So he says after December we'll have 9,800, we'll have half that much next year, and then we'll be completely gone by the end of 2016. Now, if you are a tribal leader in Afghanistan and you're trying to decide which side you're going to be on, the president has just told you we will be gone out of there, no matter what, regardless of the conditions on the ground, we will be gone by 2016. Now, how does that influence your calculations? how does that make it more likely that you're going to side with the Afghan government? Because you know the United States is not going to be there after 2016 to back them up. My point is that increases the danger to U.S. troops in the meanwhile, because more of these tribal leaders are going to make the calculation that they're not going to be here anyway, we're going to go to the other side. Why you would set an arbitrary time deadline like that, which hurts the success of your mission, increases the danger to U.S. troops, is just beyond me. And he's done it again.
What more can be done, though, as far as not only troop levels, but what we can do in Afghanistan? And shouldn't there be an eventual deadline as far as our presence is concerned?
I think we don't need to be there forever. On the other hand, setting a time deadline is a mistake. The Afghans are already doing all the combat operations themselves. What they need from us is support, intelligence support, logistical support, advice. That's what our folks are doing. And we need to be there as long as it takes to get them up to speed so they can stand on their own two legs and defend their country themselves. We didn't do that in Iraq. We left too early, and just look at the mess that has developed. Not only thousands of Iraqis dying, but now there is a safe haven in Iraq and Syria which the terrorists operate in, which make it easier for them to strike Europe and us. In other words, there's very bad consequences that come from leaving too early. And if we make the same mistake in Afghanistan that we made in Iraq, then the al-Qaeda will certainly be able to reconstitute themselves as a threat to us.
How much do you think of the current condition of Iraq and Afghanistan influenced the president's speech yesterday?
I don't know. I wish that the events of Iraq, the reality of Iraq, had been a greater influence on his speech. What I worry about is that he has an ideological determination to be out of Iraq, out of Afghanistan by 2016, the end of his term, and no facts are going to change that. So you've got, I don't know, it is disturbing because it's not based on what's in the best security interests of the country, it's based on some ideological perception that he has.
Would you say that the results of Iraq have been successful? And how would you prove that?
We don't know the last story. I think there was success. I think that success has deteriorated as we have left, so that now, as I mentioned, not only do you have thousands of Iraqis dying in internal fighting, you've got a reconstituted al-Qaeda in Iraq. And you have really, for the first time, a safe haven from which to operate, coupled with the area in Syria. So look, I think a lot of intelligence community folks believe that poses a greater danger to us in Europe as far as terrorist attacks now than it has, maybe in some time. So in some ways, the withdrawal from Iraq has been a failure. It has increased the danger to us of terrorism. To us. This is not just about internal Iraq. This is to us. And yet the president follows the same path in Afghanistan.
Our guest, Representative Mac Thornberry. To take your calls on foreign policy issues and related matters. Again, if you want to give him a call, 202-585-3880 for Democrats, 202-585-3881 for Republicans, and 202-585-3882 for Independents. Our Twitter address, at CSpanWJ, and you can email us at journal@cspan.org. Randy is up first. He's from Ohio on our Democrats line for Representative Mac Thornberry. Randy, good morning. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm a disabled vet, and I think that this thing about wait times, although it is true, I have waited 3 months for an MRI, 2 years for a consult outside the VA. Took them 2 years to make it happen. Also, the VA doctors have refused to treat me when I was in distress. They have lied on my medical records. Lying on medical records and cooking the books is standard operating procedure for the VA.
Thanks, Randy.
Deeply disturbing. We've heard these sort of anecdotes before, but I think the IG report yesterday starts to put some quantification on it. I think it may be important to say not every VA facility is this way. There are some good people who work in VA who are overcoming the system to take care of veterans, and they should be applauded, because I think now we see what a rowing within the system and still getting the job done. But across the country, there's enough instances of this sort of thing that that we have to make those deep changes that we talked about. One other point that he makes me think of, it's not just the wait times. If you're a veteran and a disabled veteran like Randy is, sometimes you've got to travel long distances to go get a procedure, hundreds of miles. And that's another thing we need to look at. Sometimes it's hard for veterans to go several hundred miles to get an MRI or whatever the procedure is. So that's another part of the system that we've just kind of come to accept, but maybe we shouldn't.
To foreign policy, this is Letty off of Twitter, says, President Obama's foreign policy makes me think America no longer wishes to be the world's police. What do you think?
I don't think America does want to be the world's police. But at the same time, we have to be the world's leader. That does not mean that we should get involved with military force in every situation. And the president, when he raises that, is one of his straw man arguments. Nobody believes that. But on the other hand, when we don't lead in any fashion, then somebody else fills the void, and whoever else fills the void is not going to make the world more free or more prosperous. A couple days ago, Lech Walesa came out with a statement, and he said the United States is the world's superpower, and it's not leading. If they're not going to lead, pick a country that will. And, you know, for somebody with his going back to his bravery and what he did for Poland, I thought it was kind of remarkable that he would make that blunt a statement about what he sees about the lack of U.S. leadership in the world right now.
So when the president says he believes in American exceptionalism, do you buy that?
I don't know. I also remember his statement that he thinks America is exceptional in the way that every country is exceptional. So he's obviously defensive. He got a lot of flack for that previous statement, and now he's trying to make up for it. I don't know what to believe. And frankly, it doesn't matter what he says. It matters what we do. I think around the world, more and more countries are discounting the president's rhetoric. What they're watching is what we do. If we draw a red line, are we going to stand by it or not? What are we doing with our defense budget? Is it going up? Is it going down? You know, what we do is what matters, much, much more than what we say.
Let's hear from James from New York. Good morning, James. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. How are you today?
Fine, thank you.
I hear a lot of people discussing the issues and talking about the problems with the VA. Yet I haven't, I haven't heard too many people address any kind of solutions other than taking General Shinseki out of a leadership position. So I have a proposal to make to the representative there as well as every other legislator out there, and it is to create a piece of legislation that will take some of our returning combat veterans, specifically Navy corpsmen and Army medics, get them retrained, get them cross-trained into medical administration, and get them into the VA to work, to run the VA. They would contribute to the VA more so than any other civilian out there, and they would be able to provide the same service that they have provided to our Marines and our soldiers and sailors on ground in combat, take that experience back with them, and be able to take that VA and turn it around. It's obviously not going to be something that's going to happen overnight, and it's not a short-term fix, and it's not going to fix any of the immediate problems, but it will assist every one of the corpsmen coming back because they do not get the training that they need on the civilian side. None of their training, none of their training translates over to the civilian side. So I challenge every legislator out there to create a piece of legislation that will be able to get those Navy corpsmen, those Army medics, directly transferred into the VA, into leadership positions to be able to assist in recreating the VA.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting idea. Certainly, the folks who are trained to provide health care on the battlefield have a lot of specialized training that it would be good to take advantage of. The only thing that comes to mind is the overwhelming bulk of the VA cases are not folks from the recent wars. They are a few World War II, Korea, Vietnam. That's the overwhelming bulk of the caseload at the VA. So you get a variety of different issues that they deal with, which are different than the young folks who have been involved in the most recent wars. But I appreciate the suggestion. I think you're exactly right. My point is just changing out the secretary doesn't fix it. What we've got to do is look for deeper reforms, and yours is one suggestion. Another that's been made by veterans in my district is to let veterans go to the civilian health providers. Give them a voucher, more like the TRICARE system works for military retirees. You know, we don't have to have a specialized hospitals and clinics for the VA. Let them go out into the regular health care system. So there's a variety of things being talked about, but it's got to be deeper change.
A viewer picks up on things you were talking about Afghanistan. This is Edwin saying that when it comes to a timeline that he sees no problem with it, they would know that the U.S. is gone, whether it was announced or not.
Well, my point is, if you announce ahead of time a specific date, regardless of what happens on the ground, then you change the calculation of those in the Afghan government, of leaders who are trying to decide whether you're with us or not, of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda who want to come back into power. Why do you give them that power, that information over you? Again, I'm not for being there forever, but I'm not for announcing ahead of time that we will be gone on this date regardless. I think it just makes it harder to be successful in our mission.
Representative Thornberry's story this morning in the New York Times saying that Syria is going to miss a deadline when it comes to chemical weapons stockpile. This is from the UN saying that roughly 8% of the stockpile remains in Syria. That's awaiting shipment for destruction. And Ban Ki-moon also saying that one of Syria's 12 storage facilities had yet to be closed.
Yeah. No, this has been coming for some time. This is, remember, a percentage of their declared stockpile. In addition, there are press reports of them using a different chemical weapon, chlorine gas, against their population. So, the hope that we all had that we could remove all chemical weapons from Syria does not appear to be happening. And so that's another one of the challenges that the United States and the world has to deal with.
Is it reflective of U.S. policy to Syria to date?
I think it's all connected. There are reports, and I don't know that he was explicit about it yesterday, that the president's going to train more of Syrian rebels because that conflict doesn't appear to be moving in any direction. It's pretty much at a stalemate.
He actually did specifically talk about it. Why don't we hear what he said and you can get your reaction to it?
Sure.
As president, I made a decision that we should not put American troops into the middle of this increasingly sectarian war. And I believe that is the right decision. But that does not mean we shouldn't help the Syrian people stand up against Israel, who bombs and starves his own people. And in helping those who fight for the right of all Syrians to choose their own future, we are also pushing back against the growing number of extremists who find safe haven in the chaos. So with the additional resources I'm announcing today, we will step up our efforts to support Syria's neighbors, Jordan and Lebanon, Turkey and Iraq, as they contend with refugees and confront terrorists working across Syria's borders. I will work with Congress to ramp up support for those in the Syrian opposition who offer the best alternative to terrorists and brutal dictators. And we will continue to coordinate with our friends and allies in Europe and the Arab world to push for a political resolution of this crisis and to make sure that those countries, and not just the United States, are contributing their fair share to support the Syrian people.
Representative Thornberry.
Still lots of questions. He did not say exactly how this is going to work, what he's going to do, who's going to do what. It was more general statements. There's still two big questions regarding help to the Syrian rebels that remain. One is, how do you know the good guys from the bad guys? And it is difficult to understand who are the so-called moderate rebels, who has an affiliation with more of the radical Muslim sects and so forth. So how do you know the good guys from the bad guys? Number two, what are you going to do that's going to make a difference? So we can spend money and we can give training, we can give weapons. Is it going to matter on the ground? And so it's those two questions that I think have been at the forefront ever since last August, when the president first was considering using force or doing something in this situation. And I don't know that we know the answers to those.
He specifically said he would work with Congress to help bolster support for those opposition forces.
Sure. Well, I'm all for that. Again, what we hear is a lot of "we'll work with Congress," and you never hear any more about it. We've had that on several issues. A lot of folks agree that this situation in Syria is one of the most dangerous in the world. And there are no easy answers. There are no, and I don't mean to suggest there are. Certainly sending U.S. troops is not an answer that I know of anybody supporting. But it is going to take our best minds working together to try to at least contain the violence and the threat that emanates from this part of the world. I think we got to do better than we've been.
Kathleen from Chicago, Democrats line. Hi there.
Hi, how you doing? I got two important things to say, and please hear me out. First of all, I think it's right for President Obama to tell these people, giving them a time date that we're getting ready to leave. After all, we've been there, 12, 15 years, spending billions and billions and billions of dollars, losing life. If these people don't realize sooner or later that the United States is going to pull out, President Obama shouldn't even have to tell them. Matter of fact, Karzai been telling the president to get out of his country for I don't know how long. But the main thing that I want to talk about is you Republicans, and I'm glad you are on here so I can talk directly to you. And I wish all veterans would listen to me. You know, just a few weeks ago, we only needed 6 Republican senators to get behind a bill that the Democrats was all for. It was going to cost $16 billion to help our veterans who you all claim that you all love so much. You want our troops to stay in all these wars, fight. You want them to do deployment. Why don't you open up the draft so some of your kids can go? But you all couldn't even come together with just 6 Republicans and sign on to this bill so you could help veterans that have went and served come back messed up from top to bottom. You all stated, your Senate said that you all didn't have the funds. All you have to do is just take 2 months at spending $2 billion a week like you're doing in these wars, and that would have added up to $16 billion, what this bill was going to cost for you lovers of veterans,
Okay.
like you claim you are.
Kathleen, we'll let our guest respond.
I don't follow the debates in the Senate. They're not able to do much of anything these days, and I think that's one of the problems our government has. Here's one thing I think, though, that people need to understand about the veterans situation. It has certainly not been a lack of money that is in any way responsible for these problems. By any measure, the amount of money going into the VA healthcare system has gone up far faster than the number of veterans entering the system. And however far back you want to look, 10 years, 5 years, whatever it is, the money has been going up much faster. So I really haven't heard anybody make the case that all of these problems in the VA have been because of a lack of money, because it's simply not true. I think VA healthcare funding has tripled since 2001. So it's not money. It's management, and as I said before, it's culture, and that's why you've really got to get deeper to fix these issues.
Chris from Illinois, thanks for holding on. Republican line, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much for letting me talk about this. The question I have is about, Afghanistan and why I think we should stay there. What is the benefit after 10 years and losing so many American lives for U.S. to stay in Afghanistan so long, because we spend a lot of money, lose a lot of lives, and after 10 years, you would think that, we have achieved the mission, what 2 more years is going to do. And then the second question, why is the tribal leaders going to change their mind after 10 years if we don't stay 2 more years?
If you think about it, the United States lost a lot of lives in Europe in World War I and World War II. And after those wars were over, we stayed with tens of thousands of Americans to help keep the place stable so we wouldn't have to come back and fight a World War III. If you think about it, we lost something like 55,000 lives in Korea. When an armistice was called, we stayed, and we're still there today. And there has not been another Korean War since that one was over, even though there are still very high tensions, and it's a dangerous place. So the point is, in several places in the world, we have been there 50-plus years with some amount of U.S. Troop presence, and the reason we've been there is to prevent there from being another war. Now just think about why we're in Afghanistan to begin with. It wasn't like we needed to go find someplace else for our troops to go. It's because that's where the attack emanated that killed 3,000 innocent Americans on 9/11/2001. And so our purpose in Afghanistan has been first to retaliate against the people who perpetrated that attack, and we hadn't gotten them all. But importantly and secondly, it is to enable the Afghans themselves to provide for their own security. So al-Qaeda cannot get another safe haven from which to operate and from which to launch more attacks against us. And the Afghans have done incredible work. They have had enormous gains and successes. As I mentioned, they are on the forefront of all the combat missions. But the job is not done. They are not at a place now where they can do everything on their own. So we've gone from 100,000, right now we have about 30,000, to, under the President's plan, 9,800 troops who would be there next year. Of course they've seen our numbers go down, they know that. But the difference is, are we going to completely leave, or are we going to be there with just a few thousand in order to support the Afghans be successful? That's the issue. My point is, maximize the chances for success. And don't increase the danger to the Americans who are left behind.
E.J. Dionne talks about American sentiment and relates it to yesterday's speech by the president, saying that the war weariness of the country feels is not thus Obama's creation. His election itself was a response to that weariness. His foreign policy reflects a determination to move the country not to isolation, but to a more measured approach to military intervention practiced during the presidencies of both George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton.
Yeah. Oh, I think there is some truth to war weariness. As Americans, we like to accomplish a job and move on to the next one. But I also think part of this war weariness that people write about is the lack of leadership. We have not had a president who has explained to us why we're there, what the mission is, and what he wants to accomplish. And I think it is very striking. If you go back to Secretary Bob Gates' book, he talks about the fact that he never believed the president's heart was in the mission. And he was very troubled by the fact that we would send young men and women to Afghanistan for this mission, and the president didn't really support them. Their success, didn't have his heart in their success. So this lack of leadership, I think, is largely responsible for this war weariness that the country understandably feels.
Representative Mac Thornberry, our guest. Randy's up next. He's from Michigan, Democrats line.
Good morning. Pedro, I thank you very much for, I'd like to thank you for this program and all them folks behind the scenes that we don't see that also gets, I got lost.
No, go ahead, Randy, you're on. Keep going.
I'm sorry. My question to the representative, good morning, Representative, thank you. I'm a Democrat, so obviously I would love to sit down and have a discussion with you over a cup of coffee. One-on-one. I'm a shop rat, so I have to be real careful on how I speak to you because I get a little emotional at times. My question, sir, is I would like to see you bring up legislation to reinstate the draft, and I would like to explain why I would like to see that to you. I grew up back in the Vietnam era. I'm 56. They stopped the draft in 72. I grew up my whole life. I never had the chance to think about college because the only thing I was going to do when I graduated was I was going to either go kill somebody or I was going to go get killed. Now, 3 years short of your graduation, I graduated in 75. Don't give you much time to switch thoughts when you grew up under that. I've seen it all on TV. We need to bring it back. You need to bring this back and let these people see what it's like to watch people slide down the side of a bunny hill. You know, this is what we've got to have.
Let's let our guest respond.
I don't think we are going to go back to the draft. I don't think there's a military reason to go back to the draft. We do very well in meeting recruitment and retention goals, and the quality of the folks who volunteer to serve in the military is just outstanding. I got to say, some of the most inspirational days that I have had since I've been a member of Congress have been walking around a village in Iraq or Afghanistan with our troops who live in that village, trying to help those villagers stand up and provide for their own security. The things our people do is just remarkable, and I don't think enough can be said about the outstanding quality of the men and women who serve. So I don't think there's a reason military reason to go back to a draft. There's a fair amount of thought that maybe it'd be good for the country if every young man and woman had to give a couple years of national service in some way. And, you know, I'm somewhat sympathetic with the idea. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. But as far as the military goes, the volunteer force is really doing well, and I think we'll keep it.
From Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, on our Republican line, Nancy's up next.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, Mr. Thornberry. I wanted to ask a question. I watched the president yesterday, his speech at West Point, which to me was lackluster at best. And he did again say that Al-Qaeda was decimated. I don't believe that's true. Do you believe it's true? Or did the president once again spew out some kind of a falsehood to the American people? I think he should be telling the truth, and that our troops are being, if anything, they are being decimated, our troops. I just wanted your opinion on that, and I appreciate all the work you've done, and go Republican.
Well, thank you. I think the best evidence, or one piece of evidence I can offer you, is a few days ago in the New York Times, the new director of the FBI was quoted as saying that he had severely underestimated where Al-Qaeda was around the world before he took office, based on what we read in the press and so forth. But once he got access to the information about what was really happening, he realized that there were a greater number of Al-Qaeda affiliates and that they were far more serious threat to us than he had realized. So it is not just, of course, Al-Qaeda in the Afghan-Pakistan region. There are affiliates in Yemen, which the administration has said poses the greatest threat to us in the homeland. Now we have this new threat in Iraq and Syria that we've been talking about. You have the AQIM in Western Africa. You have the Boko Haram, the ones who kidnapped the girls. So you have Al-Shabaab in Somalia. So you have Al-Qaeda affiliates that are multiplying. A lot of people use the analogy of a cancer that metastasizes and spreads to other parts, and that's what's happening. I'm afraid that the president really wants to push this narrative that terrorists are decimated, and that's been a success for him. That's part of what was going on with the Benghazi talking points, et cetera, et cetera. The problem is that's not what's happening in the world, and as the new FBI director says, there is still a very serious threat. And my fear is we leave Afghanistan too early, then that core Al-Qaeda group that is still in that region also springs back to life to resume their plotting and planning against us.
What do you think will be the end result of the Select Committee on Benghazi? What do you want to see happen?
Well, I want to get the truth, the full story. Frankly, I think we've gotten pretty much the full story as far as what the military did and why they did it. I think the Intelligence Committee did a good job in understanding the role of the CIA. What we have not gotten the answers to is the State Department, why they denied requests for increased security before, and the White House involvement that night. I mean, the tipping point really was this new email the White House had held back all of a sudden comes out a few weeks ago, and that's what led the Speaker to say, okay, they're hiding information. We've got to have this greater effort, more concentrated effort. The good people, both Republicans and Democrats, were appointed to this committee, so I think they'll do their job.
Do you think politics will overshadow the end result?
There will always be some politics, but again, there's good folks on both sides. And I think everybody realizes this is not really about politics. This is about what do we owe to the people who lost their lives. Even more importantly, it's about what do we owe the people who are still out there serving in embassies and consulates in desolate places around the world. We owe them to really understand this and do what we can to prevent a reoccurrence, in some other country.
Our guest is a member of the Intelligence Committee and a vice chair of the Armed Services Committee, Buck McKeon, retiring as chairman. Do you see yourself in that spot?
At the right time, perhaps.
What do you mean?
Well, we have a chairman now, and so sure, I'd like to be the next chairman, but we've got lots of issues right on our plate right now, and you always need to focus on what's right in front of you.
Josh up next from Fairfax, Virginia, for Representative Mac Thornberry. Independent line. Josh, good morning. Go ahead.
Good morning, and good morning, Congressman. Thanks for taking my question. You talked about the outstanding quality of the men and women who volunteer for our armed services, but it's currently the military's policy that service members can be kicked out just for being transgender. Do you think the military should continue to fire honorable service members just for who they are?
Oh, I think that the military is going through a number of changes. Obviously, the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell has been a significant change, and I think as the military leaders see how that's going, they can evaluate what makes sense for further changes. But I will take it slowly because the purpose of the military is to defend the country, not necessarily to be on the vanguard of societal change. And so we got to keep that mission first and foremost, and I would be cautious about changes that may or may not interfere with accomplishing that mission. So we'll continue to see what proposals the military leaders want to make, and we'll keep talking to them about it.
One more call, and this will be from David from Texas, Democrats line.
Hello?
You're on. Go ahead.
Okay. How you doing, Congressman? I'm a retired veteran, 2004, live in Killeen, Texas. You need to look into that Waco. And the question that I really want to say, what's going on with that backlog, the back payment that they're supposed to be paying these people from the ailments that they have? They're not trying to pay you. That's all I have to say.
Well, first, thank you for your service, and secondly, you're exactly right. What all of this publicity has been about has been waiting lists for VA health care. But there's a whole nother of the VA, and that is disability and retirement and disability payments and other things. And the backlog is tremendous. Again, this is not because of a shortage of money. Congress has been pouring money into the VA. I mentioned that the health care side funding has tripled. So has the disability side of VA tripled since the 2001. But yet they're not keeping up with the backlog. And so that's, again, further evidence to my point that this is not just about changing somebody out at the top. There are deeper problems within the VA that we've got to get to the bottom of. We've had hearing after hearing trying to get the VA and DOD to have one medical record that would follow somebody through their active service all the way through when they become a veteran and leave active service. You wouldn't believe how many billions of dollars, how much time it's taken to try to get that done, and they still haven't gotten it done. Meanwhile, under the health care bill, we require that in the private sector. So these bureaucracies are very difficult to reform, and yet if you don't make those changes, you're not going to fix the problem.
On the House side, the bill passed on the Defense Authorization Act for funding. As it goes to the Senate, what are going to be the hurdles that are going to be crossed for the two sides as far as their individual bills are concerned?
Well, the House bill passed 325 to 98. So overwhelming support, Republicans and Democrats. Of course, the president then promptly threatened to veto it. It had bipartisan support, but he for some reason didn't like it. There will be some differences. What happens to Guantanamo will be one of those. But actually, there's a lot of similarities. Both the Senate committee and the House have rejected a number of the proposals, like increasing fees for retiree health care, that the administration came up with. And so there's a lot of similarities. I think there's a good chance we'll have that bill completed into the president's desk, which he will sign this fall.
The DOD is saying issues like pay, issues like that kind of thing will eat into money that's needed for readiness and those kind of issues. That's not a concern?
It is a concern over the long term. On the other hand, they have made the same proposals 4 years in a row. Both the House and the Senate, Republicans and Democrats, have rejected them 4 years in a row. So there's a little bit of gamesmanship going here to hide the true effects of the budget cuts. The rest of the story is we have a commission that will report next spring on looking at the complete range of pay and benefits for our military. That's what you need to look at. You need to look at the full picture, and my view is that if you're going to make changes, you need to do it prospectively for the people coming in. Don't change the rules of the game for the people who have already relied upon the commitments that we made.
Representative Mac Thornberry joining us for a discussion on foreign policy and other issues. Thanks for your time.
You're welcome.
Coming up next, we are going to hear from a top advisor in the administration when it comes to international security measures. It's Derek Chollet, the Assistant Defense Secretary for International Security Affairs. He will join us next, but first, we'll get an update of news from C-SPAN Radio.
It's 8:32 a.m. Eastern Time. Well, Russian President Vladimir Putin